afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening to us from here on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where we try to dig a little bit deeper into the issues that are affecting us this day. Now, I promised last week's show, in which I dealt with 6 reasons why men are gravitating away from or refuse to get married. And I said I was going to deal with women. And of course, I am. It's kind of interesting. I have to say this, that, not to brag, but when I go through these shows on YouTube and I check the analytics, I have about 50-50 when it comes to male and female views on the programs that I do. And when I've said that to a couple people that I've interviewed that are somewhat more on the conservative side of issues. And they were actually quite surprised because they said in their analytics, they tend to come up with like 80% male and 20% female. And I didn't really have an explanation for it, except for maybe I try to be a little bit more comprehensive on issues and try to deal with both sides. And I think there's a lot of common ground that we can find when it comes to examining social and political issues. And so obviously I'm going to deal with 6 reasons why women are not gravitating to marriage the way they used to. Now, before I begin, I'd like to encourage people that if you're listening to this later on YouTube to please subscribe to this channel, and that'll allow you to keep up with shows that in the future if you can't actually tune in to the live show. And also, please check out my new sci-fi book, which actually deals with this whole male-female dynamic to a very large degree. And that's called The Destiny of Our Past. You can find that on Amazon. And it's a science fiction book that, the story, it's a thriller, sci-fi thriller, taking place during the era of Noah. And in case you're curious as to how that could be, you'll just have to check out the book. Okay. So anyway, 6 reasons why women are not getting married the way they used to. Now, a lot of these are actually reasons for men too, but I'm just going to begin like I haven't even done the show on men. And I have to say that, the marriage rate is half of what it was in 1960. People are getting married at much later ages. And, the birth rate is correspondingly going down. And down and down. I would say that probably once we get to the millennials are already starting to hit 30 or above. I think that once you get females hit their early 40s, and I mean very early 40s of the millennial generation, you're going to find a very large percentage that will never have kids. And if you consider the implications of that, that means entire family lines are going to disappear. All right? I know many families, even from conservative religious backgrounds, that this is it. They're gone. They are history once they die. There's no posterity. I know lots of situations where you have maybe only 2 kids that were born to the family, and neither the boy or the girl or the 2 girls or the 2 guys ever married and had kids. Now, you could say that maybe in some cases where guys don't get married to 40 or so, they can get married to someone younger and start a family. But women, when they start hitting the early, once they pass 40, their chances of having kids is in free fall. And, there's just so much of this going on now. And I think it's really sad that we're going to have many elderly orphans. So why would someone forego the chance of getting married in the time period when they're young and they can start families? Well, first of all, I think a lot has to do with divorce. Now, you would think, and it was actually promoted when we started the whole no-fault divorce thing, the idea was promoted that people would have more happiness if it's like bankruptcy. You get married to the wrong person when you're really young, and then later you at least have the option of divorcing them fairly easy. And then you can move on with your life and find someone who is more to your liking, that you're more compatible with, that you're more happy with. The strange thing about that is you don't even have to be a neo-Freudian to understand that we tend to gravitate to the same people. Okay? And that's true for men too. Men who leave their wives and go and find someone else, generally speaking, they're marrying the same person that their wife was. She might be younger, she might be more attractive, but personality-wise, she winds up being the same person. And the same is true for women. They leave a guy, and they're going to find a guy that is probably the same, in fact, in many cases worse, but still with the same personality traits. We're attracted to the same kind of people overall. But the whole no-fault divorce thing really promoted the idea that, this could be good for people and good for families because then people could correct early mistakes. I don't think that's really true, especially since we've seen a lot of the people that come from divorce, that come from families where they grew up, mom and dad getting a divorce, they become a little bit less likely, or I should say a lot less likely, to marry. And it's because there's a certain level of, well, if mom and dad didn't make it, who's to say I'm going to make it? And as they see the old, they remember back when they were little kids, and they remember mom and dad used to get along really well, and they were happy, and they did everything together. And then maybe when they're 10 or 12, mom and dad divorce. Well, they're in a relationship with someone. Everything's great. And they're thinking down the road. Women are thinking, well, what if this guy I'm with it just turns out the same way? Maybe I'm, damaged goods. Maybe he's damaged goods. Maybe they're both damaged goods. Whatever the case may be, things are just going to fall apart. So we have a situation where a lot of people are really scared to repeat the mistakes of their parents. And, I think that's a valid concern. However, like I said with men, if life is chances. When you get in the car and you turn the ignition on, do you realize that every time you get in that car and go down the road, you could wind up a bloody mess in a car wreck? Okay? Statistically, it won't happen. But there's the chance that you're the one that's going to be on the nightly news. They're crying out with the jaws of life and your legs are all mangled up and have to be cut off and so forth, or you're just, dead. Okay? That is a possibility every time you go out in the car. But yet, most of us still get out in the car and drive. Now, divorce statistics are not that half of marriages end in divorce. Half of people end up divorced. It is half of marriages end up in divorce, which means that when you see someone who's been married 4 times, that accounts for 4 divorces. So you would have to have a bunch of people who never divorced to get the statistic that will even out and say that 1/2 of marriages equal divorce. Okay? So that's something to really keep in mind. Most people who get married to someone will be with them until, one of them dies. That's just the way it is. it should be a larger number of people with someone, but statistically, your chances that if you're getting married, especially first time, you're not going to get divorced. And if you share similar characteristics with the person that you're getting married to, then your chances are less that you'll get divorced. Shared characteristics, values, aspirations, ideals, religion. In all likelihood, you'll be together. If you enjoy each other's company now, you'll enjoy it later. So, that's something to keep in mind. Even if you have been from a divorce situation, you don't have to repeat the same thing that your mom and dad did. Now, another reason that, I've noticed that women have that they don't want to get married, or that they express that they don't want to get married, is that it's such a critical choice. Okay? When you go out and buy a house, you realize that, some people, first house they buy is the same house they live and die in. But even if you intend on buying a starter home and later upgrade to a bigger home, you do realize that it's a major, major choice, and it's one you're going to have to live with. Well, the consequences, whether you bought good or bad, are going to live with you for the rest of your life. I know people that have made bad business decisions and, they're still having to pay debts off. So, the same is true for marriage. Now, the thing is, I think our society has really, and all these stupid Hollywood movies in which the woman who waited until, she's like 39 years old and all of her friends are, this is the typical plot. Her friends are married and envious of her freedom and so forth. They're not they're not happy. They're chasing kids around. And here she is, this career woman wearing fancy clothes. And she waited, but then Mr. Right comes along. He's perfect. He's like this perfect man who just never found the right woman. I'm sorry. If a man wants to get married, generally he's not this super gorgeous, successful, charming individual who, when he's 39, 40, or 41 or whatever, just never wound up in a relationship that really worked. I'm sorry, that's just not going to be the case. A woman finds that is not going to let him get away. Okay, so Hollywood is fiction. That's all it is. Fiction, fiction, fiction. And that should be understood. But still, it goes into people's minds. That's what people think. And often, Hollywood presents, whether intentionally or not, I would argue probably intentionally, emphasizes failure. Good storylines don't involve, married happily ever after. They do in children's cartoons, but not for dramas. Got to have something going on. You got to have cheating. You got to have unhappiness. You've got to have abuse, because that gives you drama. Okay? You can't have a crime mystery without crime. You can't have a drama without some sort of tragedy and intrigue and also problems. But people watch this and they think this is reality. Okay? They think it's reality. And so they see all these failures over and over and over again. And, at an emotional level, women are going to be like, oh my gosh, this is really harsh. I don't want to wind up like that. And there's always, like I said, with the whole Hollywood dramas that are aimed at women primarily, there's always this idea that there's always a better choice just around the corner. There's always time to wait. Don't get married when you're 23. Wait till you're 26. Wait a minute, 26 is still young. Maybe when you're 30, it's time to settle down. Wait a minute. Are you sure 30? Are you sure you got your career all set? You sure you sure that you're, what do they call it, grounded in where you should be? Maybe you should wait to, give it a couple more years and a couple more, and pretty soon it's menopause. Okay? Sorry, that's just the way it is. I do know there are women who, when they're 35, all of a sudden they do meet a guy who's 60 and he's a pretty good widower and all this, and hey, wait a minute. Women are going, wait. You mean 35 married to a guy who's 25 years older? And, to a large degree, your chances of getting married at 35 to another 35-year-old male is not very great. If he's 35 and for some reason his long-term relationship that never led to marriage falls apart, he's generally looking, and you can look at surveys over and over again, it's true, he's looking for women who are in their mid-20s. I'm just stating what is statistical fact. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that's just the way it is. And so this is a problem. Women in their 30s do have a severe, I don't know if it's as hard as that one. Years ago, there was like this, your chances of getting married over 30 is, I can't remember, it was this horrendous, like winning the lottery or something. I don't think it's that hard. But again, the older you get without getting married, the harder it is to get married. That's true for men, but I'm not going to deal with men right now. I get that. There's many men, though, that I've known who, they wind up divorced when they're 37, and maybe they know some people that are in their 20s, through shared interest or work or whatever, and those guys in their 20s are going, hey, wait a minute, why are you getting dates and I'm not? In fact, I've known guys who, they have like 4 kids and women are wanting to marry them because there's this maternal instinct or something that, oh, I'd love to jump in there and help you raise your kids. Okay? But I'm not going to get into the dynamics of evolutionary psychology right now. I'm just saying that there is this thing that's really been pushed in entertainment that says there's always a better one around the corner. If you do get married, you're going to wind up unhappy. You're going to be a failure. All these kinds of things. So just wait. Maybe the next one. Maybe the next one. No proof of that. Now, this goes along with it is that whole idea of loss of freedom. I've seen women complain that their parents are all like, well, when are you going to get married? When are you going to get married? And they feel this kind of push, and they don't like that. They don't like to be told what to do. They don't like to be pressured towards marriage. But there's also an idea that a woman might receive that when she gets married, well, this limits her. When you get married, generally speaking, you're saying that this is the sexual partner I'm going to have for the rest of my life. I'm talking about the traditional heterosexual marriage. There won't be any other person involved in this. And so that's one thing. The other, and of course that means no variety anymore. It means that you also have someone that you have to consider their needs as well. You have to consider such things as where they want to live. A lot of times you'll have someone that says, oh, I want to live, one marriage partner will say, I want to live in Los Angeles. I love Los Angeles. I love the nightlife. And someone else is more like, but what about the countryside? There's plenty of actually people that would rather live in Bakersfield, California or Fresno than live in LA or San Francisco. There's other people that would rather live up in the mountains near Mount Shasta and be totally isolated. But when you get married to someone, you do lose a certain level of your freedom. Okay? You've got someone else you have to share a house with. You've got someone that you've got to make choices of what you're going to be doing, where you're going to be going, and so forth. So that is a consideration that, goes into it. The idea that you're going to lose some freedom. And some people just don't like that. Now, I would say overall that the loss of freedom has a benefit that far outweighs it. You do have someone that you're connected to. You have someone who you can count on, you're comfortable with, that knows everything about you and you know everything about them, and you're growing together. But that's not what's emphasized so much in media nowadays. All right, even when they show an older couple in many movies, they're kind of like, oh, if I only had it to do over again. Horrible messages that go out there. But again, another thing that goes along with that, like I said, is the loss of choice. You don't have that ability to, a lot of times you have to make sure that if both people have careers, that they're both going to be able to have work in the same community and so forth. So that's going to create some problems. Let's say one's a school teacher and the other one's an ad executive. But the school teacher's offered a job, in Bend, Oregon. It's a moderately small community, city. Probably not a lot of jobs in the ad agencies there, at least the big ones. So, these create problems. But again, what you're getting back is so much greater. For all the freedoms you lose, you get a lot more opportunities. For all of the choices that no longer are there, you get other choices that come in. I will have to say that life is a choice. Every time you make a choice, when you choose a major in college, that means you can't do the other majors. When you decide to get married, it's no different. Okay? But that's what life was all about originally. For thousands and thousands of years. You choose, and then that's a new road you're on. Then you have choices along that road, and then you choose that, and you're on another road, and so on and so forth. Now, another thing that people throw in is boredom. I understand this. There's the idea that, when you first start a relationship with someone, you have a flood of dopamine in your brain. There's the whole idea of your heart is going to race and all that kind of stuff. But no matter who they are, I don't freaking care if you're together with James Bond or a James Bond type person. By the way, if you are, watch out because, relationships with psychopaths can often go quite bad. The thing is, you're in this new relationship, and some people become relationship junkies. Once it starts wearing off, then they find a new one, part of the pursuit of a new person, and then they're with this person, and then eventually it starts getting to, well, what do you want to watch tonight, dear? That sort of thing. But that's going to happen no matter what. Okay? And of course, any couple can decide to do things that are different. I haven't started talking about children yet. I'm going to. But they can decide to do things that will allow them to always keep a spark of creativity in their relationship. Couples that travel. I don't mean like, oh, I'm going to go on a trip around the world and visit Tibet. I wouldn't necessarily suggest Tibet if you're sensitive to oxygen deprivation. Nice place. But anyway, couples that do things together. That do things that are different, that do things that are novel. They can keep this excitement alive. But it's always better to know that there's someone there than always this idea that, okay, well, this guy I'm with, he's great, he's fun, as long as I use birth control, everything's good. But probably by next year, I'll, be probably reevaluating this relationship. If you're thinking in the terms of reevaluating the relationship, why waste his time? Just drop him now. I mean, seriously, if you don't want to get married, just Maybe he does. Maybe he will want to get married, and you're keeping him from the marriage market. But ultimately, this whole idea of boredom, well, you know what? If you're really thinking, I don't know, marriage is boring, then why don't you read one of these articles about, this goes for both genders too. Why don't you read one of these articles about, elderly orphans? Is this true for guys? It's true for girls. Once you get to a certain age, the fun stuff just isn't, the same way. Most of your friends are married or buried, depending on how old you are. And eventually you just get to this point where the things that used to be, going out to the singles bars, for instance, if you think that's fun, if you're middle age and still going to the singles bar, then I'll bet you're not getting the same results, the same quality of partners that you did when you were in your mid-20s. Okay? And also, and the thing is that your people are going to look at, when you're starting to get some gray hair, they're going to be thinking, well, what are you doing here? It's different if you're one of these people that still goes out to the gym and does those kinds of things. That's fine. But if you're trying to do things, if you're out with, trying to skateboard and stuff, or do things that are more oriented towards, you dress in, really skimpy party dresses and stuff like that, and you've got gray hair, people are starting to look at you a little different. Remember what you used to think 20 years ago about such people? Think about that for a moment. And, boredom itself, you're going to be more bored if you're single. Okay? And cats do not fill the boredom. Dogs don't fill the boredom. Hey, I love my pets. Okay? My kids, though, are what gives me meaning in life. I love the pets, to me, bring a lot of meaning to the life of my children. Okay? And that's something here that we need to discuss, this idea that our society has made it. I talk to people from countries like Syria or from Iraq, and they say, my gosh, I can't understand why Western women are so scared of having kids. They overemphasize fear of pregnancy. They overemphasize the work you have to do to raise children. Don't they understand that it's actually a blessing and it's fun to raise a family? This is what I hear from women from Syria and Iraq. Okay, I talked to a woman from Syria a while back, and she was like, I can't believe how many young women are deciding to raise pets rather than to raise kids. And, the thing is, we've had this constant bombardment in our media that has said, oh, kids are bad, 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 bad. I think this is an extension of the whole population control propaganda of the early 1970s. But it's become so institutionalized now that children are akin to, getting a venereal disease. Kids are fantastic. They are fun. They add dimension to both men and women's lives. But they've been presented as they're horrible, to the point that sometimes when you're in a discussion on the internet and you just say, hey, kids are great, you'll get someone that'll respond like, why are you telling me what to do? You're being intolerant. And you're just like, well, kids are fantastic. But you're trying to force that choice on me. And you're going, no one's forcing you to get pregnant. But you're shaming me because I'm not pregnant. And you're like, no, I'm not. I'm just saying how good. Am I shaming someone for going to one restaurant versus another if I say I really like this restaurant? But we have been so propagandized, so indoctrinated that women and men both, if you present the idea of how wonderful kids are, they're just like, no. And just like Edward Bernays said, our taste, our values, our political philosophy, our religious philosophy is the result of elite people who you don't even know their names for the most part, unless you've really done investigations. And they're working behind the scenes through media, through movies, through education, to promote an ideal that you're not the one who initially said that was your ideal. It's just that you've only had one side to the issue, and that side has just been negative, 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 negative. But a lot of women, no, I don't want to have kids. I have actually noticed one thing, though, in fairness. I only had one relationship with someone who the person initially said she never wanted to have kids. Well, that broke off, obviously. But the thing is, I've noticed a lot of women who've complained that they've gotten in relationships with men who refuse to have kids. And I think that's way more common for men than it is for women. Okay, I really do. I really do think that more women want kids than men. I think in the future we're going to have some sort of weird form of polyamory or polygamy because of technological advances and more men becoming, they're not going to be celibate. They're just going to have their Westworld style sex robot, and that's it. But again, there are women who, will think about their freedom, and this all has a common denominator for the most part. The whole, I'm going to lose my freedom. I'm going to be bored. I'm going to have to make critical choices right off. And what am I going to do? And is it going to be right? This is what has been sold into our entire society aimed at both men and women. It's this idea that marriage is like a big old, one of those old prison, steel balls connected to your leg. And I would actually say it's not the case. Okay? I mean, it's like with families that someone will say, you've got, some kid will be complaining, oh, my mom and dad had 5 kids and it was really tough. You say, oh, do you wish you could go through time and not have your youngest brother or sister? I'm like, no way, I love my brother. It's, it's easy to complain, but ultimately if you ask the average married person, do you wish you could just not be married? And let's say financially it would not affect you. Let's say you win a lottery and you could just split the proceeds and go your merry ways. I don't think the majority of people would want to do that. I think the majority of people want to be with that person. Okay? I mean, they've had to struggle. They've had to survive. They've had to fight together. And, having children is much easier when you are together. There are single people that do a really great job, but ultimately being married is much easier, especially when you consider, having the flu and you've got a kid who needs you there, and you're sick. It's much better for there to be a husband, wife, kids sort of thing. And again, I'm dealing with mostly hetero. If someone's gay and they're listening to this, I apologize. I'm just saying that this is the standard marriage, pattern traditionally. And I have done shows. I did a show a few years ago on lesbians having children. So I'm just saying right now that this is a more for the standard male-female relationship. And I really do think, again, we see very few children being born right now in the developed world. And if you really think about it, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, it costs so much, it's such a pain, it's this and this and this. I mean, if you put it on a scale of things, I think that, the average parent ultimately will admit it's wonderful. Okay? And I think our instincts are designed, both male and female, to want to reproduce. This is why the society is so negative to it. If humans were naturally selfish and didn't want to reproduce, you would have to have the society promoting childbirth to even get to anywhere close to replacement. Instead, you've got a society that just promotes how horrible it is. And yet, still people have kids. Less and less now, because it seems like the propaganda has been very effective. But ultimately, I would just ask people to think about where they're going to be in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 40 years. Because the average person who right now is in their 20s or 30s some in their 40s, are going to still be alive 30, 40, or even 50 years from now. And the family relations they're going to have in the future are going to be based on what they're doing right now. And some of these things are, not possible to reverse. Choices are made early in life that will affect you later in life. And so with that in mind, I would, we're coming up on the end of the segment here. I would just encourage people to think about this. This is not you get these men who are like, oh, I'm just going to, men going their own way, or you get women who are like, oh, men suck and that sort of thing. Sit back and realize humans are humans. The human species is male and female. And when it cooperates with each other, it reproduces and continues the human species. But when it doesn't, that species dies out. Or at least those family lines die out. The ones that do cooperate and get along and have kids, they will persevere into the future. That's Darwinism. You see, that's where Darwin and the Bible intersect with each other really nicely, because they agree, at least on that issue.
The first part of the show, I dealt with the idea of why women, 6 reasons why women were maybe not getting married nowadays. And last week I dealt with 6 reasons why men were not getting married nowadays. We are at the lowest point we've ever been when it comes to marriage and when it comes to reproduction. Okay? Not so good for the future if that's the case. We're going to have a lot of family lines that are just going to totally perish if things don't turn around.